Yeah, parental attrition. Yeah, the parental attribution error, which is yeah. I'm just saying I made a video earlier on this point, and I'm pretty sure he got it. No, I'm kidding. That'd be a little bit extreme, but this was a video I really liked by him. But I think I had mentioned in one of my previous videos the notion that like every characteristic, if expressed in immaturity, can be bad, which was not original with me, nor was it necessarily that I know of original with the person I heard it from. So who knows where it came from.
The parental attribution error. We love blaming our parents. It's practically a rite of passage in modern psychology. But there's a double standard.
Yeah, it's all my parents' fault.
Buried in the trend.
I guess it's hard to exactly quantify what is you and what is just environment. Like how much of it you're doing yourself as an exertion of your own will on your own reality, and how much of it's just like, well, I didn't choose where I was born. I didn't choose the parents I was born to. I didn't choose the body I was born into, or the instincts that it has, to some extent anyways. You can train instincts into yourself, I tend to think. But yeah, it's just a question of like how much do you actually choose, and how much are you just kite on the wind?
We attribute what's broken in us to our upbringings while claiming that what's strong is ours alone. Call it the parental attribution error, like the fundamental attribution error where we blame others' actions on their character but excuse our own by pointing to circumstance. I cut that guy off because...
Well, there's an interesting point to be made. You do understand you're the first one to ever live your life. Ever. Presuming you don't think in, parallel universes. You were the only person to ever live your life exactly the way it is. You were the only you. So to what extent you're actually capable of understanding another person's perspective, I think there are commonalities. I had mentioned kind of empathy at the beginning of this. I guess I think there are commonalities between human beings, but to actually know what it is to be another human, I don't think you ever really, I don't know if that's really in the realm of possibility when it comes to understanding. Something maybe to strive for, to try and understand other people, but I don't know if you're ever really going to get it, because you're just not them. There's no substitute for perspective, I guess.
I'm late for work, he cut me off because he's a dick. It's a skewed way of assigning credit and blame. We externalize the bad and we internalize the good. You're quick to blame and slow to credit. You say you're...
I don't know if that really makes sense. Like, I think it was maybe one of the Dr. K videos where he's saying, like, it's all you. The idea would be that effectively it's not so much what you like or dislike that's a part of you. That's not really the dynamic to use. I think it has more to do with that which is inextricably connected to you. And whether or not it's good or bad, you have to deal with it. You have to just figure it out, okay? Maybe it's good, maybe it's bad, maybe it's indifferent. Just to figure it out and figure out how to make it work with what you've got. At least that's the way I would hope people would behave.
Anxiously attached because no one held you when you needed it, but isn't your ability to be alone with your emotions and to endure discomfort quietly also forged in the same crucible? You...
Stoicism, yeah. Sorry, I'm not making fun. That is literally a good thing.
You blame your parents for pushing you too hard in school.
Yes, technically I was making fun, but it is also a good thing.
Convinced that it made you perfectionistic and neurotic, but when was the last time that you acknowledged that same pressure gave you ambition and discipline and drive? You point to a childhood where mistakes weren't tolerated as the reason that you fear failure, but what about your meticulousness, your standards, your refusal to phone it in? You complain that no one ever asked you what you wanted growing up, but could that also be why you're so tuned in to what everyone else needs? You say your low self-worth comes from never being praised, but isn't that the same fuel that makes you outwork everyone around you? You trace your conflict avoidance back to all of the
again, the notion of self-love is one that comes up a lot these days. People have even taken that to the extreme of marrying themselves. I think there was some actress lately who'd done that. Emma Watson? Is that the one? I remember something with her about Saturn being on retrograde or something. interesting lady. But I guess I tend to like the idea of being comfortable with yourself, but self-love, it feels like it's. I don't know if I don't know if I would go that far. I don't think you should necessarily love yourself. You should appreciate, bits and pieces of who you are, if they're good or if they're bad, and you should accept yourself for who you are and be comfortable with who you are. But I think love is perhaps better directed at, others. I guess I don't know. I don't know. Forget all that. I'll have to figure that one out. Figure out what I feel about that one.
Outing at home, but isn't that also where your talent for de-escalation and emotional radar came from? You chalk up your hyper-independence to not being able to trust.
To be fair, I had a whole bunch of older brothers. I wasn't the biggest until yeah, I had 4 older brothers. I don't know when I actually became the biggest. Technically, I am the biggest at this point in time, but you grow up, you kind of have to solve problems not using strength. Right? It's nothing like brothers for drilling some tactical awareness into people.
Anyone, but isn't that also what made you capable, adaptable, and calm under pressure? You say you're emotionally guarded because no one took your feelings seriously.
Dude, actually, point of order. Sorry, not point of order. There's actually a notion that I think I tend to handle like intense situations quite well. I do not handle stress well. I don't know if that's exactly this. That would be in the same category, because I don't like handle like being in a stressful situation that's extended over long periods of time. But I think in like an isolated, intense situation, I think I can do quite well in that. But like I just don't like I don't handle stress well. Like a more chronic type of thing, I don't think I would handle that type of thing where I have to be someone's sponsor or hear about their problems every day. Which makes, hopefully I'll deal with marriage okay when that comes along, but Lord willing.
But isn't that also why you're steady when the people around you fall apart? You've labeled yourself a people pleaser because you had to keep the peace at home, but maybe that's also where your social fluency and emotional intelligence were born. You blame your poor boundaries on parents who didn't respect yours, but isn't that also why you're so careful not to cross anyone else's? You say your fear of being a burden comes...
I was going to say I'm sorry for keep interrupting him. No, technically I'm supposed to keep interrupting him. I was thinking about the notion of it feels like a lot of problems... No, I guess say a lot of problems. It feels like sometimes problems in life do almost get... And I had this growing up, where you have a highly assertive personality and a personality who's almost incapable of assertion. The dynamic between men and women quite often breaks down into this. It feels like a lot of problems can be they can arise and perhaps be misdiagnosed as some sort of abuse, when perhaps it's literally just a highly assertive personality and a personality that has no idea how to assert themselves. And I don't know, like I don't want to take it easy on people who do genuinely abuse others. But I think sometimes that dynamic, especially between men and women, just it naturally falls into that type of idea where you have a woman who just like they wouldn't really say what they want. I'm fully convinced there are women who would politely ask you to stop SAing them. Like women are like quite often feels like incapable of saying no, don't do that in no uncertain terms. And I think there's actually a dynamic too where women, especially who didn't really maybe have any sort of positive like male role models in their lives, are maybe especially inclined towards that. I guess I don't know, because they're not used to the idea of just saying no, just don't. And I feel like that can be cause for some issues sometimes, unbeknownst or unintentional by either party. I think it can be the cause of some issues
from being treated like one. But isn't that the same fear that now makes you reliable, disciplined, and impossible to disappoint? You attribute your sensitivity to criticism to all of the judgment that you grew up with. But that is also what makes you thoughtful, receptive, and serious about getting better. You say your nervous system never relaxes because your home was unpredictable. But isn't that also why you're perceptive, quick thinking, and never caught off guard? The traits that you are most ashamed of are often just the dark side of something light. your sharp edges didn't
Always a silver lining, right?
appear out of nowhere. They're often the byproduct of something useful. A strength turned up too high, or a gift handled without guidance. Think about a sword. It's powerful, precise, designed to cut through resistance. But if it's double-edged, and most swords and strengths are, then sometimes it nicks you on the backswing. That doesn't...
Oh, and there's something to be said for the idea that a thing for every place, a place for everything. No, it's just remembering from Hogan's Heroes. There's a place for everything, and the thing is in its place. I believe he was talking about a bomb. I think it was. No, he was talking about a bug. It was Kinchlow. He was talking about a bug. But there's a notion that I think quite often we think of truth as being mutually exclusive, which is sometimes it's the case. Sometimes there is like irreconcilable, mutually exclusive philosophical and moral truth, right? But quite often within that, there's an infinity of subjectivity, where diversity of interest, diversity of effort. You have people who are just different. They're different, and everyone is meant to be in a specific sort of place and do a specific sort of thing. That's what they're suited to. There's a type of beauty in that, I think.
Mean that you throw the sword away. It means you learn how to hold it properly, because most traits worth having come with risk. The truth is messier than...
That's also very true. There's a notion of, I think, the reason why kids are kind of... Relatively speaking, you would say that a kid would almost never commit murder, right? I don't know if they have the willpower or the motivation to commit murder. And there's this notion of, okay, so if you crash at 5 miles an hour, right? Not much of a problem, right? If you crash at 20 miles an hour, probably more of a problem, but not necessarily that bad. If you crash at 100 miles an hour, 200 miles an hour, going to be a very big problem. Someone's probably going to die. So it feels like innate in ambition or any sort of like real motivation, there is inevitably the potential for instability, the potential for something to go wrong with that. And I feel like that's kind of a part of the human condition almost. That the people who are the most ambitious will have the most potential instability. The people who want to do the good the most. And, yeah, I don't know. So that makes sense in my head.
Single cause, because every trait that we have is entangled. Wounds and gifts often share a root. The self-reliance you're proud of might come from the same childhood where you couldn't rely on anyone else. The confidence you carry may have started as a defense against ever feeling small or dismissed again. Even your drive to succeed might be rooted in the fear of not being good enough. But this perspective requires maturity. It is simpler to cast yourself as the victim of bad parenting than to reckon with a complicated inheritance. It's easier to say, they hurt me, than to admit, they shaped me in ways that I'm still figuring out. The cultural narrative rewards blaming your parents more than it does understanding them. Therapy turns them into villains. Instagram...
That's true, honestly. It feels like the last 20 years or something. I'm going to take a strong stance here. It feels like it started with Disney films and crap like that, where you would have a well-meaning, at best, a well-meaning but simplistic or parent who just doesn't understand things. I feel like that's kind of where some of this dynamic started. You kind of have like a lack of positive role models starting there and maybe working its way into culture largely. It's like very rarely these days do you maybe see like a really positive mother or father figure just saying, well, perhaps it's innate in the notion of storytelling, because no one writes a story about the child who stayed home and didn't get into any trouble. But it does feel like there's this type of dynamic where parents are perhaps often represented as either not understanding or being inept or being malicious almost. Yeah, anyways, that's a good place to stop it as any. Yeah. Chris Williamson, Parental Attribution Error. Good video.